During the 19th century, especially the Victorian era, Bluebeard became a staple of the British Christmas pantomime. Pantomimes were like the Victorian Disney. Everyone went to them every single Christmas. In fact, they were the financial backbone of the whole Victorian theater. So they sort of survived on these pantomimes all year long. And in the pantomime, Bluebeard becomes a comic villain. He's not really comic in the story that we read. In fact, he's executed for his crimes by the brothers, and that's the end of that. But in the plays that were redone annually, although, different ones were rotated in, Cinderella, Little Red Riding Hood, Jack and the Beanstalk, but these plays, just a few of them, be rotated through, so you would have seen Bluebeard multiple times. And in this, he is comic. He's usually just sentenced to live with his resurrected wives and apologize for what he's done. He isn't executed for being a serial killer. Think about this, and think about why and how humor could be working. So I want you to watch this 4-minute explanation of the benign violation theory of humor. Because humor, although we all know it, although we all laugh at it before we can even define why we're laughing at it, is very hard to explain. But I think Dr. Peter McGraw here, who works for the School of Business at the University of Colorado, really does a good job thinking about how and why humor works. And this research he's doing, by the way, is not part of literature studies, it's part of business ethics. Didn't think fairy tales and business would ever connect, did you? And if you like this, there's also a 12-minute version of it that's a TED Talk that is absolutely fabulous. But I'm just having you watch the 4-minute version, think about how humor works, and then consider how seeing Bluebeard as a comic villain might have impacted people, particularly Angela Carter, who was growing up in Great Britain watching pantomimes like this. And how that would have impacted her 1970s revision or response to Bluebeard. And then also look at the context of the feminist or women's rights movement of the 1970s. This video was made by the BBC, so it's particularly looking at the British context for this movement, which is what Angela Carter would have been working in. And if you look at Angela Carter's page on the British Library website, that is the National Library of Great Britain, it is talking not just about the connection between her feminism and her fairy tales, because that's what she's known for in a major way in the literary world. It states on her page, in her hands, the tales are no longer digestible lessons for children, but instead richly fantastical, often satirical, comments on sexual power and psychology. And so if you have read this story and you're interested in more Carter, please look at this page and think about her. She's huge in British literature, and we're just looking at one of her stories, perhaps her most famous, but just one of them. And all of this, watching these videos, should lead you to a compare and contrast. I want you to take Carter's tale and compare and contrast the characters, the symbols, and the context or the style from Bluebeard to the Bloody Chamber. If you want, you can write it on a sheet of paper, take a picture and post it. Make sure I can see the picture when you post it. Sometimes they don't go through. Or you could write it down on a table like this, copy and paste it in there, whatever works best for you. But I want you to think about, how is Angela Carter using the same building blocks, the same motifs, to tell a story with a very different message? And the first example I've given in this compare-contrast is that in the Perrault tale that you have translated and you've read, the brothers save the heroine. But in the Bloody Chamber, the mother saves the heroine. What is the difference of having male rescuers and having a female rescuer in a tale that's very much about sexual power politics in a marriage? But you don't have to get into that. All you have to do is identify these differences, because once you do that sort of thing, once you identify these kinds of differences, it's the first step in analysis. From a list like this, you could then write a paper talking about how Carter's adaptations to the tale are a commentary about the whole literary tradition. So I could use the contrast I have to argue that the addition of the avenging mother shifts the message about a woman's dependence on a man to one of a female community and female empowerment. So you see those connections, but you're just doing the very first step, which is comparing and contrasting the similarities and differences in Carter's tale. So look forward to seeing you do that, and can't wait to see what you write.